Hey, you there, friend, dude. What's your name? Trent. Hey, Trent. Hey, listen, Trent. What's with the colors? What's with the lime and the bright pink and the gold shield? Don't you respect my immersion? This is a hardcore game with 17th century kind of colonialist overtones, and you're flashing around here in your pastel armor and stuff. You're ruining immersion for everybody. Excuse me, I'm going to throw some fireballs with a magic axe in a second. Hello again, I am Blunty, and this is New World. On the chance you haven't heard of it and wound up clicking on this video out of a wonderfully bizarre subscriber loyalty, or in a blind fury of commendable curiosity, it is an open-world MMO PC game from Amazon Games that's launching real soon. In fact, in just about 2 weeks' time from when this video goes live, it opens up for a couple of weeks or so of closed beta testing, available to any who have pre-ordered. Which means you still have time to pre-order if you want in. Now, I have had my eye on this game since it was first publicly revealed to exist, way back in September 2016, when news broke about what the new Amazon Game Studio developers were working on, including the name and a brief description of New World. And with the beta in a couple of weeks and then the launch next month, I figured now might be a fun moment to capture the journey this game has taken since then. Sketch down a full timeline from when we first learned its name to the last major patch before pre-order customers get their hands in on the pre-launch beta. Before now, there's been a few years of various closed alpha tests from which we heard very little, as it was all under non-disclosure agreements, and most people respect that. And almost exactly a year ago, in an apologetic move for delaying the game from its original planned launch date in May of 2020, there was an open weekend. They didn't really call it a beta, it kind of replaced the planned beta. It was just sort of open preview, they called it. Now, I personally have participated in 2 separate closed alpha stages, of which I can't really talk about much of because, well, non-disclosure agreements, and I'm one of those people who do respect them, and the open preview weekend, which I can talk about, and is in fact the gameplay you're seeing in this video, as evidenced by the little watermark up in the top corner there. See on the right hand? Now, with that said, this gameplay is of course not an entirely accurate example of what the game will look like in either the closed beta near the end of July nor the full launch at the end of August because, well, this is about a year old. The game still looks largely similar in the way the graphics and environments look, but since I recorded this, a lot has changed about how combat works. The UI has had tweaks, the weapon and armor designs have been changed, the animations have been fiddled with, the skill trees have been changed, the way food works has been changed, crafting has changed, the way questing works has changed, and so much more. In the year worth of delay from the original launch date, they have done a lot of work. But the only reason I'm using this footage, even though it is out of date, is because, well, it is the only footage I can show you while we chat about it. But as you can see, New World has a kind of 17th century vibe when it comes to presentation of armor, weapon choices, and architecture, and while there's only humans as a playable race, it also leans into some high fantasy with magic and monsters and undead and some kind of plant zombie people things and ghosts and such. It also has an action RPG style of combat which revolves around not tab targeting and timed skill rotations from a hotbar and stuff you find in the likes of World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy Online, but falls in a space more familiar to games like Dark Souls or even Breath of the Wild. It's a lot more about selecting and timing attacks properly and dodging and blocking at the right time and anticipating and predicting and looking for tells and using various kinds of offensive or defensive support skills if you're under fire from multiple enemies at the same time. And the game mechanically rolls around a largely PvE experience, but with several different events and game modes built around heavy PvP action, so hopefully everyone will be pleased. That is, if we lived in an imaginary world where it would be possible to please everybody. We don't. Don't expect some people to whinge, because they will. But it wasn't always this way. Extremely early on in development, it was being built as a fully PvP survival sandbox style of game, and even in this early form, back in 2016, it was said to have deep ties into Twitch integration being planned, because Amazon, of course, do own the popular streaming platform too. You also have to keep in mind that back in 2016, the MMO genre as a whole was seen as to be in decline, some even calling it a dying or dead genre of gaming. Rather foolishly, of course, and certainly in hindsight, MMOs are doing great today. But there was a lot of excitement and fear around a brand new IP, a big budget Western-made MMO trying to crack into the market. The, at that time, shrinking market. There was also lots of discussion about how long-lived an open sandbox PvP, or gankbox as some called it, could possibly live. By a very wide margin, the most popular and successful long-lived MMOs out there have always been PvE as primary and PvP as a more isolated mode, or something to lean into in endgame only. Or at the very least, opt-in the open world. But after we first heard about this game and the fact that it existed at all, things went largely quiet for several more months, as you kind of expect this early in development. But in February of 2017, we saw our first screenshots, and with them, confirmation that the game was being developed on Amazon's own in-house and freely available game engine, Lumberyard. These screenshots were clearly in-engine shots, but not in-game, just scenery. There was one of a small village and one of a tree in a light forest environment. They looked very lovely and impressed many visually, especially when compared to how most MMOs look, but also the fair criticisms noting how eye candy is not gameplay, so don't get too excited even though they are pretty. But for the most part, the community was encouraged by this little peek at what could be. Then a desert of virtual silence. Outside of an occasional job listing or a mention in an update for the Lumberyard game engine itself, nothing much new about New World was heard. Then, in January 2018, came a big leak. A 25-second long video was posted anonymously to the New World Reddit forum. Taking the form of what was apparently a clip made to be included in marketing, or far more likely, given the time frame, internal briefing presentations. And I don't know if it'll trigger some kind of copyright bot here on YouTube, so for safety's sake, I'll just show you a couple of still frames from it, although it is still online if you go looking for it. But it was just a few shots, one of 3 players standing in groups switching weapons, one of an isometric map preview, one of a traditional map, and a quick shot of a player holding a lit torch and approaching a building in the dark. The full narration of the video's voiceover read, "Group up in parties large or small for coordination. Share chat, maps, status awareness, buffs, and experience. Working together has never been so easy. Guilds and alliances enable the organization of hundreds of players with their own tasks and roles in large-scale efforts towards a massive martial and economic power." It was the first time we saw the game in motion, and it, again, this early in development, was predictably a bit chunky on the frame rate and animation side of things, but otherwise it looked compelling. It looked reasonably believable. The video was never denied or confirmed officially, just kind of ignored and taken down where they could. But now, with hindsight, we look back on it, and it was clearly legitimate. This is an early form of New World, and our very first look at the game in action. Later, in January 2018, 2 more videos surfaced. Neither of these had any gameplay in them, but were just made up of still shots of what appeared to be concept art, but the narration was the same voice and done in the same style. Once more, it was very possible that these 3 videos were all hoaxes, but again, with hindsight, it's clear that they were all quite real, and again, likely to have been made for internal use only as presentation aids. A few months later, in May of 2018, a tweet suggested that a few influencers had been invited to the game studios in California to do some early play testing. Predictably enough, though, basically nothing came out of this, as it would have also been under strict non-disclosure agreements. But it was another sign that development was still going strong and coming to a point where they wanted outsiders to weigh in on how it was playing and feeling. Until August 2018, when out of Gamescom, where Select Media had some preview time, there started to slip out some more info. For the first time, we learned that there are no classes, or at least no preset classes in the game. Your play style, your effective class, is instead dictated by the skills and weapon choices you make, and you can just change them at any time you like. We learned that there will indeed be a lot of socially focused features with guilds and home bases and taxation and territory control and the like. We also learned there was what was being called a deep crafting system, closer to a multi-staged and heavily layered and intertwined survival games system rather than the typical RPG-style crafting systems. Confirmation of the action RPG-style combat came here too. No tab targeting, manual aiming, and animation lock-ins, with reports that the world feels very well crafted and alive with lots of, details and critters running around and such, and lush and densely detailed environments on a very large map. And at that same time, the official New World site was updated, now with a form to sign up for a chance to get in on an alpha test. This also came alongside a few new screenshots. Then, at the end of August 2018, came the first official and publicly posted videos. Sadly, it wasn't gameplay or anything exciting, just some environmental stuff of a single locked-off camera angle and a little bit of environmental audio. At the same time, PC Gamer published a preview article describing the game as a mix between a survival game and an MMO, and mentioning a player-crafted quests system and players being able to build outposts and such. In fact, how everything in the world would be player-built. This is also the first time when the monetization was mentioned. That's right, if you remember just a few months back, a big hullabaloo about MTX being confirmed to be in the game, and well, yeah, we've known about that for literally about 2.5 years. So anyone pretending it's brand new news was being a bit of a fool and not doing their research. But even back then, they promised no loot boxes, no pay to win, just additional vanity content. Well, we already know that attitude and that promise has changed slightly, as well as a lot about what PC Gamer described the game was, but we'll come back to that part of the timeline much later on. A few weeks after this, though, in September 2018, we learn via an interview from Shacknews with studio head Patrick Gilmore about how death worked back then, saying that players will keep anything equipped, but their inventory is fair game to be looted. A few more screenshots and environmental videos also hit the net later the same month. Again, nothing exciting, but they did look nice. And around the same time, a wave of alpha invites started going out to those who signed up a few months back. Then, as if by clockwork, about a week after the alpha started, October 2018, someone from the alpha tester group uploaded a big chunk of gameplay to Pornhub, of all places. I won't be showing any of this, as pretty much everywhere it got posted, it was taken down as fast as possible too, including from those who did valid commentary over it, which technically was fair use and protected, but you'd have to go to court to prove that, and nobody wants to do that. But it showed the action combat at last. We got a good look at a couple of environments, and the map, and the UI. Missing was any vision or even a hint at the previously mentioned structure building mechanics. Officially, New World threw up a few more environmental screenshots around this time as well as a look at the map screen, and what could be interpreted as a player-built mini-fort at a crossroads. A few more environmental screenshots appear by the end of October 2018. Also by now, leaks from alpha testers start suggesting that the game is a lot less sandboxy and a lot less survival-focused than the earliest details suggested it would be. November 2018 saw a continued slow dribble of official screenshots and, as always, just environmental stuff, but there was also a significant update to the map we've previously seen. It looks a lot better now, featuring a lot more detail. By mid-November, some teasing about gathering and crafting and professions had started, including shots of mining and blacksmithing. By the time we got to January 2019, the official social media channels have started posting more frequently, and often with very short video clips of gameplay, or at the very least an on-screen player walking toward a thing. Super exciting. Then, in February 2019, for the first time, at least officially approved for the first time, we see extended gameplay, as a few outlets are permitted to post their own gameplay recorded and approved by the developer at a controlled preview hands-on event. And as is common for this type of media playtest, they were ushered through a few different sections of the game. First, some very early game progression, then some exploration and open world combat and crafting, then some PvP siege stuff. Of course, none of that gameplay is mine, so I won't be showing it to you here, but for the most part, it looked pretty similar to what you're seeing on screen now, at least visually. Mechanically, it did operate a bit differently, but yeah, more or less the same. By March 2019, new waves of alpha invites start going out, and they expand their tester base alongside a new batch of short environmental clips and screenshots. The same pattern keeps going for a few months. Then comes May 2019, and the announcement comes that, with thanks to the few thousand alpha testers they've onboarded so far, they'll be implementing major design and feature changes so dramatic and so sweeping and so game-changing that they're taking the alpha servers completely down at the start of June. See, till now, for the previous 9 months straight, it had been a 24/7 operation. The alpha servers was stayed up just for that entire 9 months. Well, the occasional reset and reboot and whatnot, but otherwise constantly online for the past 9 months of testing. And now they were just taking them down. And no word on how long they would close them down for. No word on when or even if alpha testing would open up again. Although sign-ups were still being accepted through the website, so it was assumed it would come back again. And then came June, and the servers were switched off as planned, and New World published a neat little infographic to show what the testers had been up to for those past 9 months, including chopping down nearly 5 million trees and declaring war on one another 4,500 times. And then came the silence again. Lots and lots of silence. Months passed, and many with their eyes on the game started to worry that the scale of the changes they must be making could be huge. So huge, it might not effectively be the same game anymore. This was beyond adding a few features, beyond doing a bit of balancing. This was major changes happening. They had also shut down the official alpha tester forums, completely disappeared them, and they deleted a whole bunch of videos they had been publishing on their YouTube channel. By this point, Amazon Game Studios had already seen a few games cancelled before they even saw the light of day, been through some layoffs in some other departments, and, most worryingly of all, announced another new MMO they'd be making. A licensed one. A Lord of the Rings one. A free-to-play Lord of the Rings MMO. Which is, as of today, by the way, dead, thanks to some licensing issues they had with one of the other holders. But back then, many worried that the resources would be pulled from New World to focus on Lord of the Rings, as of course Lord of the Rings has massive brand recognition, and that alone would help it to be a bigger earner and more attention grabbing. And it was going to be free to play, so you know it was going to be stuffed to the guild with MTX. So things felt shaky for New World. By September 2019, despite the devs tweeting about how they're still working hard on it, speculation and worry and flat-out panic was kind of rampant. Things stabilized a little when in mid-December 2019, the first trailer was shown at the Game Awards show. And rather more reassuringly, it appeared in the Steam store, with a price and a release date of May 2020. It's at this time too, in the surrounding developer interviews that were happening around the launch of the trailer and such, that we get our first hints at what has changed, and the core talking point around that was the change to PvP. Moving from a predominantly PvP-focused experience to PvE with opt-in open-world PvP and special areas where PvP would be implemented in a more controlled, more fair, and more sensibly structured way. See, it turns out open PvP anywhere, anytime, on anyone led to catastrophic griefing and a lot of very annoyed players just trying to get some gathering done or something. Who could have predicted an open and unrestricted free-for-all PvP would lead to griefing and mob zerging? Only everyone who's ever played a game like that could have possibly predicted it. But they also wanted to assure players that skill-based combat was still a very heavy focus, and now PvP only happens when people want it to be an option. They choose to be open to it and choose to participate in it. A little later in December, the Dev Diary videos start coming out, offering some behind-the-scenes insights into some design decisions and mechanics. And although it wasn't talked about much, about now is when they walked back from just letting anyone build any crap they like, wherever they like. Turns out that was massively disruptive to gameplay too. What a shocker. Things settled down for a while with the usual dribble of screenshots and dev diaries. Meanwhile, the self-proclaimed hardcore PvPers were pooping their pants in every corner of the internet they could find with New World discussion. And I get it, I do. The thing that they like, PvP, was being dialed back in this game that they were looking forward to. And it makes them frustrated. Of course it does. But the thing with PvPers is, and especially the kind of PvP that caused this issue in the first place, they're almost always hyper-aggressive knob-biters who can't communicate except in violence, which makes listening to them try to articulate any human feeling a deeply exhausting experience. Which doesn't really help their case, does it? But it's a fact that PvP behavior, like constantly griefing low-level players or ganging up on solo players, was making the game shittier for everybody except the shit-licking griefers doing it. I know, hashtag not all PvPers, but certainly enough of them for the New World devs to take massive and sweeping action against that behavior. But again, reassuringly, PvP still exists, just in a smarter way, a better way, a fairer way. And frankly, any PvPer who is against fairness and a level playing field is exactly the kind of PvPer that caused the issue in the first place. So, good riddance as far as I'm concerned. You reap what you sow, you dillholes. Don't want to be treated like an a-hole? Try not acting like an a-hole. A month later, in February 2020, New World devs start talking about the settlement systems, the towns where players can set up a home, work on projects to improve the town, earn access to higher level crafting station upgrades, and join one of the factions and go on faction missions, many of which are, by the way, PvP flagged. And they talk about how the players themselves govern the town, with the controlling company setting things like taxes and such. Territory is to be earned, warred over, and won, along with the benefits that come with it. By mid-February 2020, new alpha servers came online with thousands of players flooding in to see what had become of the game in its many months in the dark. It was also at this point where I first got my hands on with the game. I hadn't played it at all before the PvP apocalypse, so I had no frame of reference for how much has changed as far as that went. But I did see the in-game chat about it, and I saw more positive opinions than negative ones. Oh, sure, there were the self-proclaimed hardcore PvP types, and they would pipe up from time to time and have a little bitch fest occasionally, but they were largely ignored by people just, having fun and learning and exploring and testing and experimenting and, just playing a video game. It was all under NDA, of course, so I can't really talk specifics or show you anything, of course, but I was having fun. I was enjoying myself. In March 2020, the devs would start talking in more detail about the player housing feature, with semi-instanced housing, meaning more than one person can own a specific building and live in it, which is a smart way to solve the issue of space and pointless housing scarcity, or back when players could build whatever they like whenever they like, just having the entire map covered in constructions. March is also when they start openly talking about weapons and specializations in the dev diaries, again reinforcing the real-time, high-skill-based combat system and how vastly a weapon choice and skill tree selection can change your gameplay style. Then, in the first week of April 2020, thanks in part to the pandemic slowing down development, launch was delayed from the planned March to August 25, 2020. And with that, they moved the closed beta to July. Throughout this, the alpha remained open. In May, they start talking about the big boss creatures like the Spriggan. In June, they talk about gathering a little and then crafting to go with it. By the middle of June 2020, the plan was still to run the closed beta for pre-order customers on July the 25th and launch a full month later. A couple of days later, they dive into one of the core PvP-focused modes, War Mode. They also started talking more openly about the armor, weapons, and skill and attribute systems, including detailing the very refined hitboxes, simulating hit volumes for actual weapon shapes on the server side, and the simulated defensive capsules per limb for the character, meaning positioning, blocking, and timing is all very important in combat and should feel very intuitive. They talk about how there's basically 3 weight classes of armor and how that will affect the way you move, if you dodge roll or sidestep, depends on how light your armor is, and other nice immersive touches to go with it. They also release a 30-minute video exclusively showing PvP War Mode. It had mixed reactions. Over the course of June and July, the Twitter account spends time focusing on one weapon type at a time, but then comes July 10th, 2020, just a couple of weeks before the planned closed beta, and less than 2 months from launch. And the news comes. The game is getting another delay, this time to the second quarter of 2021. It didn't come as a huge surprise to many, especially the alpha players who had concerns about things like how quests work and the lack of variety therein. Many, in fact, had predicted the August 2020 launch was too soon, and the game needed more fine-tuning, more polish. And we were right. Thank heavens they didn't pull a Fallout 76, or to use a later example, a Cyberpunk 2077, and release on an arbitrary schedule just to please investors, only to instantly turn around and regret it with a disastrous launch. I'll take a delay over a premature release anytime, ladies. So, instead of the closed beta or full launch by way of an apology and compensation for the disappointment of said delay, pre-order customers were told there'd be a preview weekend so they could try for themselves and get a taste of how the game currently stands. There was no NDA on this preview event, and as I said at the start, and that is indeed where this footage has come from, I even streamed it, as did many other content creators. Most had a lot of fun, most reacted quite well to it, and most of those agreed it could use a little more time in the oven, or a little more polish, or whatever metaphor you like. In short, very nice world to be in, everything felt really nice, but there did need a bit more small game in the big game. More variety, deeper implementations, smarter, there was also a closed alpha density test a little while before that preview period, just to stress test the servers before Joe Public came flooding in. They piled in as many alpha testers as possible onto a fresh server as they could and waited for it to break. It went surprisingly well, for the record. But the preview event is also the last time I got to play. I haven't been lucky enough to lottery my way back into any of the subsequent alpha test stages. Things go silent after that for a few months while the dev team hammers on and examines what happened in the preview event and the feedback they got. Then, in early September 2020, a blog post goes up. The dev team admits to being humbled by the reaction to the preview event, but excited by the responses and suggestions too. I quote, "We will continue development, now armed with a vast amount of feedback, suggestions, and data. We plan to focus on adding more mid and end game content, and also features that are just fun. In particular, we are working towards adding more in the areas of game modes, landmass, AI variety, and additional weapon types, quest variety, and more. We are excited to share our vision of New World with you. We will continue pushing in this direction until we feel we have the right amount of content and polish for the great launch our players deserve." This attitude was very well received by any gamer with half a brain. Again, a delay is better than a catastrophic launch, especially for an MMO. A new stage of testing opened up, and from what has leaked out from under the NDAs, the changes they're working on were largely well received. In September, in an interview with Game Industry, game director Scott Lane brings up the subject of Twitch integration for the first time in a very long time. Like the idea of Sub-Army, a feature that allows Twitch subscribers on the same server as the streamer into their company or party. And Streamer Spotlight, a feature that lets streamers identify themselves in-game and provides a notification of how many people saw the streamer get a kill or indeed get killed. That later one seems like it could bait some interesting content for PvP. I know for a fact that in other games I've played, when someone is well known as a streamer and uses their streamer name or just has something like their Twitch URL in their handle, please don't do that, they often become targets for organized griefing. But I do like the first one, where subs can easily party up or company up. Come October 2020, a new alpha wipe kicks off, and the patch notes indicate they're starting to fine-tune leveling speed, this time reducing it. In October, they start showing off new locations and new professions and new gathering options, like fishing. In November, they continued fine-tuning difficulty, making late-game combat more challenging, more mobs, more bosses, and harder enemies all around in the high-level areas especially, including giving elite bosses special traits to make them even more dangerous and engaging and add in some more variety to combat. There's also a second retool of the threat system at this time, making roles like tanking and healer more nuanced and interesting. Things like healing and critical hits also got balanced tweaks too, alongside some UI and quality of life changes. The fine-tuning and polish application was in full swing by now. In December 2020, even more combat fine-tuning takes place. New weapons are added, new animation tweaks, adjustment of skill trees, speeding up of weapon switching, and altering the attack interruption mechanics and special ability cooldowns. Then, finally, 2021 chimes in. The January alpha patch notes include a significant overhaul of crafting to help keep crafting and gathering relevant right through to endgame and adding in even more variety and a lot more control over specialty crafting. Also along for the ride, new weapons and new armor pieces, a big tweak to food and how it works, and more fine-tuning of elite bosses and overall mob AI adjustments. In February, the release date gets another push back from the vague spring 2021 date to a more specific but still delayed August 31st, 2021, with a new closed beta date of July 20th. Updates and patches continue at a rapid pace, and by March we're seeing a whole new territory being added in, including their own bespoke set of mobs. By this point too, we're learning about expeditions, instance small party co-op dungeons to you and me. I find these particularly exciting. And also the new 20 vs 20 endgame PvP mode, Outpost Rush, new story content, new fully voiced NPCs, more new armor, more new weapons, new quests, another tweak to leveling speed, boosting early game experience again back up after lowering it a bit too much last time. The inclusion of diminishing XP returns for going against severely underleveled mobs, another rebalance of life staffs, and flags for bind and equip and bind on pickup, making the crafting and in-game player market a lot more useful and relevant and should help keep the in-game economy ticking along properly. By April, they were adding in Steam achievements for the 28 people who give a room temperature crap about Steam achievements, and included further incentivization for faction versus faction PvP, including the ability to fight over forts in a territory outside of full declared wars. Enemy AI continues to be tweaked. Loot tables continue to get tweaks. In May 2021, the transition from closed alpha to the impending closed beta is starting in earnest, now focusing in on bugs and polish and performance and really nailing down balance. More expeditions are also added, and tweaks to cosmetic stuff like how in-game titles are earned and used, and an overhaul of how housing pricing is done. And they continue to fine-tune balance for experience and leveling speeds. The patch notes for this month were massive. And by mid-May, the recent blow-up about the cash shop happened, and many content creators, including yours truly, made videos about it. But like I said a lot earlier in this video, microtransactions themselves aren't news. We've known they were a part of the plan for literally years now. What scared people this time around was the specific mention of stuff like XP boosters and the ability to speed up crafting and gather leveling by using real cash for boosters. The kind of stuff that the words pay to win start being thrown around with. There was a huge freak out, and the devs heard us loud and clear on that one. They have recently remarked on how overwhelmed they were by the negative response, so hopefully they tread very carefully from now on going forward with this issue. And they have, at least for now, committed to nothing but cosmetics until 2022 at the earliest. But considering 2022 is literally just 4 months after launch, that promise isn't worth much to early players. By the end of May, the official YouTube channel is offering up short tours through various locations, showing off the individual personalities and aesthetics. June hits, and even further fine-tuning to experience and leveling happen to help players not out-level content too quickly, boosting some types of experience gain and nerfing others, and then slowing leveling overall after a player reaches level 7. Fully 50 new armor sets were added at this point, alongside tweaks to a lot of existing sets cosmetically and weapons, and a further polishing pass on the UI and control schemes. And something long overdue. A nice big stack of new options for character appearance settings. New faces, new hair, new beards, new eyes, new skin, new scars, new tattoos. And more video content is pouring out of the official YouTube channel, offering location tours, light-hearted looks at a few base mechanics like fashion and housing. And the devs continue to play damage control around cash shop controversies, addressing player feedback on that, and adding more details about the dungeon expeditions. End of June, another big patch, huge, and you guessed it, even more fine-tuning of progression and leveling, rolling back a little of what the earlier June patch did, as it turned out to be a little bit of an overcorrection. Plus tweaks to PvP rewards, a reduction in PvP death penalties, more new gear, more expeditions, and more tweaks to the PvP modes overall. Also by now, from my personal experience point of view since I last played, 4 entirely new weapon classes have arrived. The Ice Gauntlet, very cool, Great Axe, ooh, Spear, and Rapier, alongside those heavy tweaks to the weapons I was already familiar with. I'm very much looking forward to trying out the new weapons in the beta so I can go into launch with a better plan on how to kit out and set my attribute points. And of course familiarise myself with the new combat mechanics, because they've changed a fair bit too. But yeah, that's a pretty complete, although not as exhaustively deep as I could have been, but I feel this is a reasonably good overall timeline of New World, all the way from when we first learned its name through to what was probably the last major patch before the closed beta. The game has changed a lot, and I believe pretty much everything they've done has been for the better. And I speak from the outside looking in, and as someone who has played many hours of the alpha. So, I hope you found this interesting. I pretty much just did this for myself. I kind of felt like I wanted to organize the journey in my mind and just get it down and sort it out and get a good feel for how long it's taken to get where we were, to where we are or where we're going to be. Because like I said, I have had my eye on this game since day one. Literally, since we first learned its name and what type of game it was trying to be. And I hope it goes well. See you in Eternium. Oh, that's the name of the place, by the way. I don't think I've mentioned that in this video, but yeah, that's where it is. That's the fantasy place. Thank you for watching, and thank you as always to the patrons scrolling up above there, whose above and beyond support is fantastic, and I really do appreciate you guys, and I appreciate everyone else who just made it to the end of the video. Hopefully you gave it a like and subbed if you didn't already. Make sure you hit the bell, all that kind of stuff we have to say. I'll get you next time. I am Blanty. Thanks for watching.